Hi everyone, this is FaZe and welcome to my channel. A few days back, I unboxed the all-new iPhone 14 Pro Max, both in the silver and the new space black colors. I even compared them to the previous generation colors. If you want to check that unboxing and color comparison out, you can click the link above or in the description below. Each year, we hear Apple say, "This is the best iPhone yet."
These are the best iPhones we've ever created.
It's the best iPhone that we have ever created. The best iPhones we've ever done.
Of course it is. It's the new one, so of course it's better than the previous one. And this new iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max are fantastic indeed, with a new 48 megapixel camera system, an always-on display, and the new dynamic island. But the question is this enough to upgrade? Well, let's find out. The iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max attempt to reinvent a few things that have always been on Android phones for quite some time. The hole punch cutout, housing the front-facing camera system, the always-on display, and using a higher megapixel camera for pixel binning purposes. Now, I've been testing the iPhone 14 Pro Max for the past few days, and while this is not enough time for a conclusive opinion on how this phone really is, I do think I have a general idea of what works and what doesn't. So first off, let's go over the design and hardware. Other than the new hole punch cutout, which Apple has dubbed Dynamic Island, terrible name, by the way, there really isn't that much to talk about in terms of design aesthetics and the look and feel, because it's just like the iPhone 13 Pro Max, which looked and felt exactly like the iPhone 12 Pro Max. Now, other than the new cutout, the iPhone 14 Pro Max mostly looks and feels identical to those previous generation iPhones. Yes, the Pro Max is 2 millimeters thicker now, and the camera module protrudes slightly more, but if you handed me both phones with my eyes closed, I would not be able to tell them apart. Now, this is both good and bad. I personally like the design that the 12 Pro series started off. They have this ultra premium build quality that looks mature and professional. So those who upgrade purely so that the design is different may be disappointed. However, I love this design, and hey, if it ain't broke, why fix it, right? Now let's talk about the display. The 6.7-inch OLED display is noticeably brighter this year. In fact, it's the brightest smartphone display currently out there in the market. And yes, you do get ever so slightly more screen because the notch has switched to a pill-shaped cutout now. And it only gains a tiny bit of screen space compared to the notch, but for me, the aesthetic is way cleaner now. The Dynamic Island is technically a software feature, so I'll talk about that in the software section, but spoiler alert, I like it. I like it a lot. Now, aside from the increase in brightness and the new Dynamic Island, you also get an always-on display. This is a feature that I always wanted on an iPhone. On Android, it's always been there for quite some time now, where you have a black screen with text for time, notification icons, and maybe a bit more information like the next event on your calendar. Fundamentally, it's just a minimal black screen with only bits of crucial information on the display. Now, Apple usually isn't the first to implement certain features on its devices. They take their time to perfect it, but when they execute, they do it brilliantly. And that's exactly what they did with this display. They took the always-on part literally. Like your entire lock screen just dims a bit when the phone is locked and not in use. So you can see your wallpaper and your widgets. Now, the best part is that it looks wonderful and that Apple can do this without completely draining the iPhone 14 Pro phone's battery, all thanks to a new LTPO panel where you get a screen refresh rate as low as 1 Hz. And its new A16 Bionic processor allows this display to refresh in the background while using minimal power. And if you don't like your phone screen always on, you can always turn it off in the settings. So now that the phone has this amazing brighter display that can also stay on, what about the battery life? Well, I'm happy to say I haven't really seen any significant dip in battery life compared to last year's big iPhone. In other words, the iPhone 14 Pro Max's battery endurance is great. It'll be an all-day phone easily for most people. Now let's talk performance. This is the part I hate talking about because let's just be honest here, this iPhone is crazy fast. Not just this one, but even the one before this iPhone and the one before that one. Getting back to hardware, the iPhone 14 Pro Max runs on the Apple A16 Bionic. And what more needs to be said? Even the A15 Bionic still beats any silicon out there in Android devices. This is the most powerful mobile chip out there, and you'll only benefit if you really do intensive tasks like render 360 or 4K videos, use AR applications, or other graphic work. If your smartphone usage is just email, web browsing, social media, a little bit of gaming here and there, you're not going to even care. It's not going to be noticeable for you. But I guess it's good to future-proof your phone. But now let's talk about the dynamic island. Ever since Apple introduced the iPhone X with the notch, it has been a topic of much debate. Most people hated it at first, and other brands even poked fun at it. But guess what? Within a year, almost every Android phone released post iPhone X had the notch. And while hardcore Android fans still crack jokes about it, guess what? Tens of millions of notched iPhones out in the real world prove that the average consumer really doesn't care. To Apple's credit, it never wavered on the notch. Instead of trying to hide it via a digital bezel or something, they went the other way and told developers not to hide it, but to leave it alone. With the new island cutout, Apple has taken it another step further by asking everyone to actually look at it now. The animations are buttery smooth, and it actually feels as if the dynamic island expands, when in reality it's just an illusion done by the software. Once the iPhone is set up, the dynamic island will often shift in size depending on the task you're doing. Anytime Face ID needs to kick in, for an example, the island expands horizontally. When I start a song on Apple Music, as I swipe out of the app to do something else, the app flies into the island, which then expands slightly to show the album cover art on the left and a small music wave bar that thumps along to the tunes. Holding on to the album art of the dynamic island opens a floating music control box, and when you tap the icon, it opens up the app in full. This action is the same for all apps. For an example, when you open up voice memos, holding on the island expands in a floating menu that lets me pause or stop recording. Tapping on the app opens the app in full. Now, does Dynamic Island fundamentally change how we use the iPhone? No. Is it a gimmick? Possibly. But I love it anyway. Though admittedly, I am a sucker for aesthetics in my gadgets, I care more about animation fluidity and slim bezel sizes more than fast processors. Now, let's talk about cameras. Apple gave its main camera a big upgrade this year to a 48 megapixel sensor. And to be honest, I've snapped some shots already, and I'm not confident that the cameras bring major improvements. Like when I compare shots from the 13 Pro Max, I was expecting some groundbreaking shots, but I was confused to find how similar the pictures were. I even showed them to a few friends, and they couldn't really tell a difference. So from a limited testing perspective, it's been almost impossible to spot differences between a 14 Pro Max and a 13 Pro Max, unless I really zoom in and see the sharpness levels. Cinematic mode also seems the same as before, but trust me, one thing I've realized is that the new camera doesn't bring much differences. If you want to upgrade from the 13 Pro Max just for the camera, don't. Seriously, it's a nice camera, but the 13 Pro Max is just as amazing, and most won't be able to tell the difference. Now, in conclusion, the iPhone 14 Pro Max is an amazing smartphone. Apple is a very original and creative company that comes up with cool ways to do things, and Dynamic Island is one of those first hardware-software tandem UI interfaces that we've seen. The iPhone 14 Pro Max is a much smaller improvement over the 13 Pro Max than Apple marketing would have us think. Do I think it's worth upgrading from a 13 Pro Max? No, unless you just want the latest and greatest. If you have a 12 Pro Max, it's a decent upgrade. Anything older than a 12 Pro Max, then this new iPhone is fantastic. Now, at the end of the day, we have reached that peak in the smartphone market where only so many things can be improved. As always, if you have any questions or thoughts, comment below and let me know. If you've upgraded, let me know which iPhone you've upgraded to. And if you haven't already subscribed, be sure to hit that subscribe button for more videos on iPhones, Apple gadgets, and more. Till then, see you next time.